Bob Kern, and I'm here today with Miki Stash, and we would like to talk story about the Friends of Hanauma Bay and who we are, what we've been doing, and what we hope the future for the Bay is. I've been affiliated with Hanauma Bay for about 20 years, a number of roles there. I've been a volunteer for about 15 years. And that's been a very interesting and rewarding in many ways experience, and kind of depressing in others. When the Marine Education Center was constructed back in the last century, I was on the mayor's committee that helped develop that plan. And of course that committee was very ably led by Dick Baker, who is a former president of the Friends of Hanauma Bay. I've been a member of the board of the Friends twice, once back in the early 2000s, and now again I'm vice president. And we are and have been working to make improvements there. We think that it's very important that people be aware of what happens at the Bay. You all know it's protected now, a very special place, and we think a better job can be done to continue doing that in the future. And we'll be talking some about that today, hoping that we can educate people out there who are listening more about the Bay, and hoping that we get more people to take an interest in coming out. I know a lot of residents don't come to the Bay, and I think that they're missing out on some very special things there. But what I'd like to do now is have Miki talk and talk a little bit about herself, and she's going to talk a little bit about the history of the Bay as well. So, Miki?
Aloha. I'm Miki Stash, and I am currently the secretary on the board of the Friends of Hanauma Bay. Like Bob, I had worked originally on the mayor's task force. We were on it together. And because of concerns with the original plans that the mayor had for Hanauma Bay, there was a lot of outrage from the community, and we were as well outraged. So we worked on the task force, a lot of changes were made, and the new education center was built. After that, I went on the board of the Friends of Hanauma Bay in the early part of 2000, and then recently went back on the board. I'd like to give you a little bit of history of who the Friends of Hanauma Bay are, because I think there's a lot of misconceptions about us and who we are. And Hanauma Bay is actually, it's a 501c organization. It was formed in 1990. Back then, I don't know how many of you may remember, but Hanauma Bay was becoming extremely overcrowded, and the mobs of people were just coming constantly. So the city and county decided that it had to take some steps to help conserve the Bay and alleviate the destructive activities of all of these crowds. So it put in some access regulations, and at the same time it initiated the education program that's currently at Hanauma Bay. So while all those efforts were going on, there were a number of concerned citizens that felt that the city and county needed a broad-based support from the citizenry, so they came together and formed Hanauma Bay. Since then, the Friends of Hanauma Bay have been working as advocates for the Bay, helping the government. We actually traditionally have been working with the staff and management at Hanauma Bay, as well as the education program, to advance the efforts of Hanauma Bay. One of the things that we have, because we're a citizen group, we're not a government group, we have, there are a lot of things that we can do that staff and management and also the education program, which was part of the University of Hawaii, cannot do. They're limited in some of the things, particularly the advocacy kind of things that they're not allowed to do, so we can step in and help out there. So we've traditionally had a working relationship with those groups. And we have been considered the official, recognized as the official adopting agency for Hanauma Bay. Hanauma Bay is made up of volunteer citizens and
Friends of
Friends of Hanauma Bay, made up of volunteer citizens. And I want to just point out that we are not the volunteer program at Hanauma Bay. We're a separate entity. A lot of people think that the Friends of Hanauma Bay are the volunteers that you see when you go to Hanauma Bay, the ones that show you the video and answer your questions. We are not those volunteers. They're part of the education program. We're a separate group. Many of the docent volunteers at the Bay are members of our organization, but not necessarily all of our members are docent volunteers, and we are separate, and I want to make that very clear. Some of the things that the Friends of Hanauma Bay do, we do a lot of educational support of the education program, as I mentioned. We do outreach work in the community. We also have supported science and engineering, particularly when it pertains to marine life and marine conservation. And in that, there's a Hawaii Science and Engineering fair every year, and we have always awarded an award to one of the winners who have the criteria that we have set up. So that's something that we have done every year to help promote that. We also help to monitor the reef. Many of our volunteers go into the water, they snorkel, they dive, and then we can report back things that we see in the bay, good or bad. And we also do beach cleanups. We are the official organization to do quarterly beach cleanups at the Bay. One of the things that we have been involved in lately is the advocacy portion of it, where we try to get things done at the Bay that need to be done and help to protect it. And that's been a big part of the things that we've been doing lately, to the disadvantage of some of the other things. So we'd kind of like to get that taken care of and out of the way and move on to other things. But that's pretty much who the Friends of Hanauma Bay are. If you want more information, at the bottom of the screen down here, we have our website, so you can always contact us at our website and go find out more about us. And anybody who is interested in Hanauma Bay and would like to get involved, we'd love to hear from you and have you help us out. We're always looking for new members.
Well, that's right, and we're always looking for more people to help us, especially, keep an eye on how things are going there. I think one of the important things that you mentioned is the monitoring. Many of our Friends members, and many other people as well, who are out snorkeling or diving in the Bay, bring back reports of netting that they may be finding on the reef, things like that, and that report eventually gets to the people who need to do something about it. And it's that kind of advocacy that has been our major role in the last 6 or 8 months. I'm sure many of you know, as we know very well, there have been a lot of concerns raised about the condition the facility is in, about how so much money was spent to create this beautiful education facility and how it has pretty well deteriorated. So we have been spending a lot of time trying to get changes made that will correct that situation and prevent it from happening again. One of the ways that we advocate is by talking and testifying before the City Council. We've done that a number of times. Recently, the City Council looked at a resolution that would ensure that there is an annual audit of the Hanauma Bay Fund. We'll talk a little bit more about that fund in a few minutes. It was a little disappointing, to find out that they deferred that, but it is still open and it can still be done again. A bill has been forwarded, however, by the City Council to ensure that interest from the Hanauma Bay Fund stays in the fund. That has not been happening, and that's been a concern as well. And so our advocacy role has been major in the last 6 or 8 months, and hopefully we are having a positive effect on that. The fund, as I'm sure you know, is unique in the Parks Department. In 2002, there was a lawsuit that said money that comes into the Hanauma Bay Fund from admissions and concessions has to stay in the Hanauma Bay Fund and can be used only for repairs and maintenance, education, and carrying capacity study. Based on the condition of the facility, that money has not been used for maintenance and repair, and we're wondering why. And I think we have a couple of pictures of things around the facility. There's a roof on the restroom that has been in complete disrepair for about 10 years, and we just are asking the question, why wasn't this fixed? Copper flashing was stolen about 9 or 10 years ago, and it's just been in that condition ever since. And so as advocates for the Bay, we've been asking why. And we've been making some progress. Once some of these questions were raised and pictures shown to people who could do something about it, we have noted and we have appreciated that some steps are being taken to make some of these repairs. But recognizing that these things have been long-standing, we want to make sure that this never happens again. And so how the fund is used has been a major source of concern for us, and we're hoping that an audit will be approved to be done on an annual basis to make sure that this doesn't happen again. Miki, can you say some more about the audit and the importance of it?
Yeah, there was an audit done in 2007. That was more of a performance audit, and at that time, although they said the funds were not being misappropriated or they were being spent appropriately, it didn't really go into the details of where exactly the funds were being spent or how they were being spent. So this audit, I think, will address some of those issues. They're also in the federal court ruling that stated that the funds have to remain at Hanauma Bay. At that point, there probably should have been a change in the way things, the financing of Hanauma Bay operated. It should have been separated out, but it wasn't. The Hanauma Bay is part of the Cocoa Head District Park, and as such, it's kind of clumped into all of the other parks within the district. Now, the funds are separate, but there are some use of the funds in the other parks. We've discovered that some of the employees may work in do some work in the other parks, but yet they're paid out of the fund. There are supplies that are paid out of the Hanauma Bay Fund that are then used at some of the other parks. So there's not a complete separation as there should have been, and so we have concerns about that. And so I think by having an annual audit, we can have a better, clearer picture of where these funds are being used, what they're being used for, and if they are in fact being used in Hanauma Bay and not in other places. So that's one of the importance. And it may, our figures show that we could be talking about a considerable amount of money that has been actually, kind of diverted out of Hanauma Bay for the use of the other parks. So, we want to get a clear picture and find out exactly what is going on, and the only way that can be done is through this audit. So, I may make another comment on that too. I think that, one of the things that we're talking about is the funds have to be handled differently. They have to be, there have to be changes made in the procedures that the city and county employs when it comes to Hanauma Bay. And that's one of the things it seems to not have been able to do in the past. And, that's the only way that I think, things are going to get straightened out is, there have to be some changes made.
Yeah, and I think a recent example of an unfortunate incident can be used to characterize that. We all recall that there was an incident where there was an injury at the bay. A lifeguard was hit with a falling coconut, and it turned out that complaints were known about the possibility that this might happen, and yet the fix was put in through the normal city fix-it system. The bay was put in queue in line with other parks to have those coconuts cut down and the place made safer. In the interim, the injury occurred. Now, remember, there was a city process that is typically followed by the Parks Department in order to get these kinds of things taken care of. But keeping in mind that Hanauma Bay has its own fund, it's like your bank account. There seems to be little reason why things like that cannot be fixed immediately. A report is made, a call is made to somebody to make the repair, and a check is written. It could be that simple, because that fund sits there and it could be used very efficiently to make repairs and prevent such accidents from happening again. But the city's been reluctant to do that. We're looking at a picture right now of a railing, and if you all think back to 2010, the railings were a major issue. They had to be repaired. They were in much worse condition. There's a safety hazard now that's coming on the screen. Every time it rains, we get these gullies on the beach, it's just ugly, and people walk through it. Another example, this hole in the faux rock is at child's eye level, and I wouldn't be surprised if some little kid comes in someday and puts his hand in there and gets scraped up. All of these things could be fixed, as could the roof, relatively quickly, if the fund could be used if it were a bank account. If you had something in your house that needed fixing, you'd write a check and get it fixed right away. But as it is, even though that money is there for the use only of the bay, it still needs to go through the city process, the procurement process and all of that. And it takes a long time. And while we appreciate that steps are being taken and looked at, none of these things have to wait a long time to be fixed.
And I might just point out too that one of the problems with waiting so long to fix the things, the situations become much worse and the repairs become way more costly. What happened with the coconut, they had to bring in a crew on a Sunday morning. So I have no idea what the expense was for that, but they had to, close the bay for a couple of hours, bring in a crew on a Sunday morning to cut down the coconuts. The railings that I think in the picture they were brand new railings a few years ago, are already starting to get rusted because nobody goes around maintaining them. As soon as rust starts appearing, it needs to be cleaned off. If you do that, you don't have them getting into such a dire strait that they now all have to be replaced. And that was a very expensive endeavor to replace all of those railings. So those are the kinds of situations that go on. If we would just repair things in a timely fashion, it would be much less costly.
Yeah, and I think talking about the railings was a big issue back in 2010. And when holes were discovered, they were in actually much worse condition than that picture that was just shown. We learned that it was known that the railings needed repair, but they were left. And it was not until the pictures of those railings were shown publicly that any action was taken. And they were only repaired as a result of, at the time, I think he was the acting mayor, Caldwell, ordered that they be fixed. And now they're starting to deteriorate again. So, and we're seeing the same pattern. Things are being attended to now, but only because the Friends have brought these to the attention of folks high level in in the city government. And it seems like it shouldn't have to be that way. When things are seen to need attention, they should be repaired. So we hope that, and we're feeling optimistic that 5 years from now, we're not showing you the same pictures of things that have been ignored and need to be fixed right away, because these things are really safety hazards, and there are lots and lots and lots of people that go there, and the potential for injury is quite real.
Right. So we have been working with the city and county. We have been having meetings with them. We're trying to work on getting an advisory committee. Because one of the things that we've also discovered through all of our travels through this is a lot of the decisions that are being made about Hanauma Bay are being made by people that never go there, have no idea what's going on there. You know, they're people in the, well, we're not sure who's actually even making the decisions, but they can be people in the Parks Department or the Budget Department or this department or that department, and they have no idea what's going on. So we're trying to get an advisory committee together, and we're negotiating and working with the city and county on that. That will be composed of stakeholders and people that are familiar with the Bay, who know what's going on, to help advise on what needs to be done at the Bay, what should be done, when money needs to be spent, all of that, and try to get it to a point where it can operate and run much more efficiently, and things can be taken care of in a timely fashion. And the things that need to be taken care of, as we said, the money is there. We've got, the money is sitting in an account not being spent, and things are not being repaired. There's no reason. It's one thing, I know a lot of times the city will cry, well, we have no money, we can't take care of this. That's not the situation at Hanauma Bay. And every time we talk to people and say we're having these problems getting things repaired, they say, but you've got money. And I say, yes, we do have money. So what is the problem?
Yeah, and the idea of the advisory committee kind of grows out of a business model. There's a bank account at the Bay. It's there. It's to be used only for the Bay. And we were looking for some way to reorganize and restructure so that could be used, the fund could be used effectively and efficiently. And the idea was to, right now there are 5 park districts in the city, and the idea was to create a 6th, which would consist of Hanauma Bay. And because Hanauma Bay is so different from other parks with its own fund, many other differences as well, that a 6th park district could be just the Bay. And the Bay would be managed by a manager, and that manager would report, as Miki said, to an advisory committee. But this advisory committee is not just advisory. This is an advisory committee that would have decision-making authority, and it would be made up of people who know the Bay, the Parks Department, the DLNR, the Ocean Safety, the Education Program, and the Friends. Nobody knows Hanauma Bay better than those people, in different aspects of how it works. And of course, with an annual audit, that would be a check on the activities of the advisory committee. But if this committee has decision-making authority to use the fund, which would be maintained in the city, but could not be used by anybody but the Bay, then these things that we see happening would just not happen anymore. Things would get fixed on time, and decisions, again, would be made by people who know what they're talking about. There has been a long history of people at the Bay not knowing what happens. For example, when the budget leaves Hanauma Bay, it disappears, and things are put in or taken out or changes are made with no explanation, with no consultation. And this has been the tradition, and we think this should change. And we think that our plan is one that will help accomplish that. So we're looking forward to that. We are working with the city, the Friends, and the city, the Parks Department, and from the managing director's office are in the meetings, and we're hoping that we can come up with a reasonable, sensible solution to this, so that we don't have to go through this anymore. It's been a long time, and the bay needs to be properly cared for. So
I agree with that. And it would be nice, as I said before, that to have these things taken care of and off our plate, and then we can spend our time doing more fun things to help the bay out, because this has been quite tedious for all of us involved, believe me.
Well, and
for
fun things
everybody.
and more educational
and
too. You know, one of the things that we want to do is there's plenty of money, and the bay is it's a marine life conservation district. It's protected. It's about education, and we want to get kids there. And a lot of the schools simply cannot afford to get their kids to the bay. Well, there's plenty of money sitting there. Why not use some of that to get schools to get their kids, get the buses, and bring them out to the bay for a day and have a fun and a learning experience? And that would help immensely, but those sorts of things don't happen. That's one of the things that we want to do in the future.
Yeah. And as well as maybe try to work on ideas, spend some time working on ideas to figure out how to get more local residents out to the bay, because that's something that from the very beginning we have wanted to do, and there are a few more coming out, but it's still not a very very large percentage, and it would be very nice to be able to find ways to get the local residents interested and involved. And it's a beautiful place, and it's a great place to bring your kids. So it would be nice to be able to develop things that could get more folks out.
Yeah, everybody agrees that we would love it if more local folks would come back, and I know there are people who remember the days when they would drive down to the beach and they love that. Well, that probably isn't going to happen again, but just being there, and the place itself is very special to a lot of people. So we're hoping for a positive future and a much more efficient operation out there. So anyway, that's our take on this. Just a few seconds left if you want to finish it off, or if you want to let me finish it off,
Well, you can go ahead.
Okay, well, we're looking towards a more positive future out there, and hopefully things will look good for a long time to come and stay that way out there. So thanks for listening to us, and we'll see you out at the bay.